Hello everybody! In this tutorial I would like to show you how to create a simple Makefile to deal with LaTeX projects. The reason for creating a Makefile is very simple: to reduce and automatize a series of commands. You know that when you have cross-references for figures, equations, tables, you have to compile several times. When you have citations, you also have to deal with BibTeX or Biba, and make index if you are creating an index or a glossary at the end. So many repetitive and tedious commands to obtain your final project in a PDF format, for example. In addition to that, all these compiling steps produce a lot of intermediate and output files that you might want to remove from time to time. A Makefile permits to optimize and automatize all this. I know that many of you use some graphics user interface, like Kyle, in which part of this automatization is already done, but only partially, so a Makefile can be useful even in those cases. And in fact, softwares like Kyle permits to customize the build stage in order to use external Makefiles. Let's start then, and we take the example of an article that is structured in 3 sections, displays images, and contains external citations. Let's create a Makefile. Basic at first, and as far as we proceed, we'll make it more elaborated, general, and powerful. So this is our project. We have our article.tex file here, which contains, as I said, 3 sections. We have some external citations, and we have, we will see in section 1, we have also some images to be referenced. The entire project contains several articles. We see here article.tex, we have the style, we have the file with the references, and we have the 3 different sections. So normally when we have to generate the PDF for our project, we have to compile. And let's see what do we have when we obtain the PDF. Here it is. We have our file, PDF, and of course the references are not correct because we compiled only once. We still have our figure. We don't have the reference file at the end. Okay. So let's start by creating a Makefile to do all the steps necessary to obtain a correct PDF. Normally, what we will have to do is to also give the Biber command that recognizes all the external citations, and then compile the file again. Once. Okay, now we have everything here. We have our reference files, everything is there. But of course, to do that, we had to type several times PDF LaTeX article and Biber, and as we said, we also have a series of intermediate files that we want to get rid of. Okay, the Makefile is here, but it is empty. So we have to start by creating our target. Normally, when we create a target, this is called all. And what we want to create is the file article.pdf, and the article PDF is created starting from the all the sources. The sources are article.tex, and the action to do the action that we did before were the following. So LaTeX, Biber, LaTeX, LaTeX. We save, and we see if this works. Of course, nothing to be done at this moment because the PDF, the article PDF is already there. Let's remove it. And everything is compiled correctly. Of course, in this situation, the Makefile permits us to recompile each time there is some novelty, something new on the file article.tech. If we change something in the section1.tech, like here we remove a part of the paragraph and we save, here nothing will be done because section1.tech is not one of the sources declared on the Makefile. So we will have to put here all the articles, and the same goes for the figures. For example, here there is in the directory images, section 1, the image Neptune. If we add the new figures in this directory, nothing will be specified for the Makefile to recompile the code again. So we want to include all this. To do this, let's first create a series of sources, which is not only the article.tech, which here I would like to call the main file, but also the section1.tech, section 2, section 3, the references, also the style. All this file I would like to consider as my sources. And of course I have to define now the main file that I declare to be article.tech. So here, instead of article.tech, I will put my tech sources. Let's save, and let's make again. And in fact, it will do the whole structure of the compilation again. And if I change something in section 1, now we will compile again. Let's also add the figures, all the images that we want to include. To do that, we do the same thing that we did for the sources. We add the figures here. This command says to find all the files that are contained into the directory images. This find is also recursive, so even if something is created inside directories that are inside images, this will work. So each time I add a file inside these images, so you have to be disciplined not to add other files that you don't want to be in your tree-like structure, but if you do, the Makefile tells the prompt to compile everything again. Okay, so let's finish up this part. Here there is no point in call PDF LaTeX article, it will be just the main, so in such a way that we can change the name of the project once and for all. And also let's create a clean command to remove all the intermediate and output file created in compilation when we want to, for example, to start everything from scratch. So let's remove all the files that are called main, so article in our case, dot PDF, log, BLG, and so on and so forth. So let's put a tab here. Okay, so this command will be executed at clean time. One thing that is always very useful, even if you are disciplined enough not to call anything clean or all, sometimes it is useful to protect your Makefile by declaring certain command like clean or all to be protected, such a way that if you happen to create a file called clean or all, it wouldn't mess up with your Makefile, so that your make or make clean or make all will always mean something. Okay, let's make clean the project. And it didn't work. Why didn't work? Oh, this is because the brace operation here inside the clean works in the bash shell and not with the shell that is automatically called by the Makefile, by the make command. So it will be better at the very beginning to declare that our shell is the bash shell. Let's see if this helps. Make clean. It worked. Very well. Let's see also if this kind of structure can be generalized. For example, here I consider that other than the citation, we can also use the index. That means create a sort of glossary at the end. You can see here that everything in terms of the style, the new command, is inserted inside this MyStyle package that I normally create as an extra file. So to completely separate the content of my file and the style into another, in which I decide the geometry. And here, for example, I can say to our project to also create an index. So let's save. And that means that in my Makefile, I also have to create the index. The command is called make index, and again, make. Let's compile. Very well. I have now some index that was generated by the use of this index here. For example, in the caption of the image, Rings on Neptune, I put the index Neptune so that at the end I will have a glossary in which the word Neptune is contained in page 2, like here. Okay, what else can we do? Well, there are several things we can actually do to improve our Makefile. First of all, we can consider one thing. Each time that we made a little change, here at the moment, the Makefile tells to do all these things, to latex the code, to make the index, to prepare the files for the bibliography, and to compile twice again. Sometimes it is very useful to just compile once the code because you have changed something that doesn't concern formula, doesn't concern citation, doesn't concern indices. So you want to compile the code just once to see what is the final result. Well, you can define a once target in which you say PDF LaTeX make. This doesn't take any source, That means that when you type make once, it will always PDF LaTeX the code, like here. And again, we can use the Makefile also to compose files. What do I mean by that? Here you see that there is a file called cover.pdf. I would like to use this file, cover.pdf, as a first page of my final product. I will have article.pdf, but I would like to be preceded by one page. It is a cover page, for instance. This can be also generated by LaTeX, or it can be generated with whatever program you want. So I would like to add that, and we can also use the Makefile. So we have to create a new target. Let's call it final.pdf, and this is created using the pdftk command that combine, in fact, the cover plus the main, and of course will operate once the file cover.pdf is there, which is always there, and the file is created. So for example, if this file, the main file.pdf, in our case the article.pdf, is not there, it will firstly do that by looking at how to do this here. Oh, actually here it's called still article.pdf. It should be called main. Let's not have any more article around. Okay, and in fact, well, let's always make everything. Okay, this has created the article.pdf, and now I can say make final PDF to create the final document. That's it. And in fact, it created the file final.pdf that contains the first cover page plus the article.pdf. Okay, let's then ask a final question. You see here that the main part of the Makefile is this part of the command here. To create the article.pdf, starting from the sources and all the images that can be inserted here, we have to do all this command. Here I use a sort of conservative operation in which I use two PDF LaTeX commands. It happens that sometimes we need actually 3 of these to be correct. For example, when we have a table of contents that require an extra LaTeX passage, the things can be even worse if, for example, you have a list of table or a list of figures in which the caption might contain a reference, and in that case you have to pass even 4 times. So you might wonder if there is not a general way to call the LaTeX command exactly as many times as necessary, rather than redundantly call it so many times. Actually, there is a way to remove all this, substitute by just one command, if you are able to install, and I think you are able to install, another command which is called the latexmk. So let's comment all these things up. And let's substitute all this by just one command line. The line is latexmk of the document. And here we just have to specify that we want to produce a PDF, because this command in general can produce also DVI or a PostScript file. Let's see if these things works. Let's clean our project. Here everything is cleaned. Let's make now. You see that it runs several times. It has run also the Biba. Essentially, it did everything, because here I see that my index is there, my references are there, all the numbers are correct. So essentially, the latexmk, which is not delivered with all your Linux distribution by default, you have to install it, and so you have to be in a situation in which you are able to install or to compile yourself the program. That's why I said if you are able to use it. Well, this saves a lot of time, because you can remove all these things and you can just use one command line that gives you exactly the final result, and it runs the PDF LaTeX or the Beaver or the Make index exactly as many times as necessary. He decides that. And another point is that this to run also needs some quite complete Perl installation, because it's essentially a Perl script post-processing all this operation. So you will need to be able to install programs in your machine to use this command. This is great, because now we have a working Makefile. You might also wonder why we started by mentioning all this PDF LaTeX, Make index, Beaver, and so on, while we could have directly used that. Well, first of all, as I said, it's not obvious that you have this latexmk program, or you can install it easily. And the other point is that it's always useful to know what is the structure, what you are doing. Okay, a final point is related to an objection that I very often received, which is the following. If you do any change in your document, for example, here let's add a new sentence. In order to see these new things in your PDF document, you not only have to save the file, but you also have to compile it. Even if this now, it is a very simple things, because you just have to do make, you might wonder if there is no way, like certain features of the graphics user interface have, like Kyle, or if you use Overleaf, the feature in which, as far as you write, the system automatically compiles and lets you see this without even typing make. Well, this is again possible. This is not a particular feature of Make, but of the latexmk. So let's get back here. And let's add another option here, which is called -preview continuously. This option permits the latexmk to compile continuously the code as far as you write on it. We can see it. So let's say this, and let's call it the first time make. And you see there is a need to update continuous for target file, watching for update files. You see, if you don't type Ctrl+C, so if you don't stop now this, as far as we write here, a new sentence is created in the main article file. If we save, without touching anything, it starts compiling. And this is true at each time we save. We insert something, we save, and the system will compile and will add automatically the corresponding line here. I actually do not like this feature very much because in order to work well, we have to include other options. To see this, let's imagine that here we make a mistake. For example, by creating a command that doesn't exist, and when we save, it will start to compile again, and now it is blocked because we have put an undefined control sequence. That means that here there is a command that it's not recognized, and so now this is stuck, and we have to intervene ourselves to remove it in order to generate a new PDF. So these things can only work if we insert another option here. And the option is the following. We have to consider to run PDF LaTeX in a non-stop mode. So to do that, let's generalize the command. When we call PDF LaTeX, we call it with certain options, and the options are the following. Put them here. The interaction is non-stop mode. This means that even if there are mistakes, go on. And as far as you manage to create something, even if you have to skip some unknown commands, it doesn't matter, and it will work. Of course it will work, but you will have still the mistake. Start all over again. Make. Oh wait, I have to save the Makefile. And you see that it creates something. Here there is still the mistake after sad, but it doesn't appear anything, so we just ignored. So in order to use this, some might say the killer feature, this preview continuously version of latexmk, in order to use it efficiently, you have to put this option, and this option means also that you might not recognize some mistakes. So that's why I don't like it too much, but I recognize they can be useful to produce very quickly and a first draft with a correct, more or less correct PDF file. Great. We have created our quite elaborated, in general, Makefile. We want now to be able to share our project with someone else. So why not use the Makefile to produce a package that we can then send to our friends or colleagues. To do that, let's go to at the beginning and let's give a name to our project. Let's call it latex and Makefile, and let's tell the code to produce, for example, a tar.gz package of our entire tree-like structure of the project. You can put it here before, after clean. So we create a new target. First of all, we clean everything. We just make again all to be sure that the code compiles. This is always a very good policy. So we clean again in order not to have any intermediate files. And we put everything in our project. So here I call the files project _date. I give the date in such a way that if I do this a couple of times, it doesn't overwrite what I previously created. and I put inside this file or the sources, the figures, and this cover.pdf file that I can use if I want to create the final PDF file. Here I just have to create the date. So let's put it the beginning with a certain format, not too verbose. For example, we can use the format of the date in which there is the day, month written in letter, 3 letters, and the year in 4 digits. Let's see. Let's close it here, and let's do make tar gz. Well, let's ls first. Okay, make tar gz. Okay, Control C. Of course, this minimum runs didn't work because we had the mistake. Okay, let's remove the mistake, and let's remove for the moment the preview continuously. So let's do it like that. Make touch it set. So clean, make to verify that it works. It works. The project file cannot be created. So that means that the project there is an extra space. This is not good. Let's try again. Done. Okay, let's see, it has created a latex and Makefile 3rd of December 2020. This is the previous one that tried to create, but there was an extra space. So let's remove it. Okay, very well, we can just check that the entire structure is here. It seems so. All the file, the images, the structure, everything is here. So we can do the same thing for zip. There are those who prefer the zip command rather than the tar and gz. So let's put it after here. The case with the zip. And let's save and make zip. In principle, it should do the same thing. Well, first of all, let's imagine to do the same thing. So clean, it compiles everything again to see that everything works. If it doesn't, it stops, it cleans, and then it creates the zip file. Let's see again if the entire structure is there. It seems so. Files, images section, images video, everything is there. Perfect. We have then created our Makefile. It is quite general. The only final things that we can do is just to clean it up a little bit. For example, normally what I would do is to put everything that concerns the project at the very beginning, which are the things that you might want to change when moving the Makefile from this to another project. And there are not many lines actually. Oops. There are not many lines. There are only these 4. So you see you have to define a name for your project. This can change. The name of the main tech file. This also can change. Your sources file. Again, they can change. And where to find the figures. Sometimes this is more or less the same. At least for me, it's always in images directory. but this might change, of course. And so these are the files that can be changed from one project to another. The rest can be adapted to all situations. And so you will find this this Makefile in the text section of this video. Bye bye.